My name is Sophia Bennett, 27 years old, and my picture-perfect marriage nearly fell apart when I discovered that everything connecting me to my husband was built on carefully crafted lies. After 3 years of what I thought was authentic love, James revealed his true colors through a single text message that was never meant for me. My so-called dream husband thought I would stay quiet as always, but this time he went too far. The consequences went beyond what anyone could imagine. Before I continue my story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more family secrets nobody talks about. I met James during my second year working at Evergreen Publishing in Boston. At 24, I was still finding my footing as a junior editor, dedicated but often overlooked. The company holiday party changed everything. I wasn't planning to attend, but my colleague Diane insisted, promising it wouldn't be as boring as the previous year. "You never know who you might meet," she said with a knowing smile. I remember walking into that hotel ballroom feeling out of place in my simple black dress, when a tall man with kind eyes approached me. He introduced himself as James Bennett, newly appointed marketing director. For 3 hours, we talked about everything from classic literature to our shared love of rainy Sunday mornings. By the end of the night, I had given him my number. Our courtship was swift, but seemed genuine. James was attentive, thoughtful, and surprisingly vulnerable. He spoke about losing his parents young, being raised by his grandmother in Vermont, and his struggles building a career without family connections. I fell for his story as much as for him, the self-made man who overcame adversity. 6 months later, he proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small but elegant, with only 30 guests, mostly my family and friends since James claimed to have few close connections due to his nomadic career. Life as Mrs. Bennett felt charmed at first. We bought a modest but beautiful house in a leafy suburb outside Boston. James earned a promotion. I advanced at the publishing house. From the outside, we were the perfect couple, young professionals building a life together, hosting dinner parties, planning for children. The first crack appeared about 18 months into our marriage. I was organizing our home office when I found a birthday card addressed to James from someone named Rebecca. The message inside read, "Happy birthday, big brother. Mom and Dad send their love." It was dated just 3 months earlier. My hands trembled as I read it again. Brother? Mom and Dad? James had told me repeatedly that he was an only child and that his parents had died in a car accident when he was 12. I sat there, card in hand, wondering if there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. When James came home that evening, I showed him the card and asked for the truth. He hesitated, then laughed nervously. "I was going to tell you eventually," he said. "My family is complicated. We had a falling out years ago. It was easier to say they were gone than explain the mess." I wanted to believe him. I told myself families are complex, that estrangement happens. But something about his explanation felt hollow. Still, I let it go, choosing trust over suspicion. Weeks passed, and life returned to normal, or what I thought was normal. Then came the business trip to Chicago. James was gone for 5 days, calling each night to check in, telling me how much he missed me. On the 4th night, he mentioned having dinner with colleagues at a steakhouse downtown. "The client loved my pitch," he said proudly. "We're celebrating tomorrow after the final meeting." That same night, scrolling through social media before bed, I saw a post from one of James's coworkers, the entire team at a baseball game in Boston, not Chicago. I stared at the timestamp, posted 3 hours ago. In the photo, everyone from the marketing department was clearly visible. Everyone except James. Sleep evaded me that night. I tried calling him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. The next morning, he texted saying his phone had died and he'd call later. When he finally did, I didn't mention the photo. Something told me to wait, to watch, to gather more pieces of this increasingly confusing puzzle. James returned home 2 days later, bringing me flowers and a small silver bracelet he claimed to have found in a little shop near the hotel. He regaled me with stories about Chicago, meetings that never happened, and people who existed only in his fabrications. I wore a mask of normalcy while my mind raced with questions. Where had he really been? Who was he when he wasn't with me? The James I thought I knew was dissolving before my eyes, replaced by someone unfamiliar and frightening. That night, after he fell asleep, I did something I never thought I would do. I checked his phone. The password was my birthday, the one predictable thing about him. What I found shattered any remaining illusions. The messages appeared innocuous at first: work emails, group chats with colleagues, texts with friends I knew. Then I found conversations with someone saved as L. They stretched back 2 years, before our marriage, continuing through our engagement, honeymoon, and beyond. The most recent exchange was from that very day. L. Miss you already. When can you get away again? James. Working on it. S doesn't suspect anything. Maybe next month. L. Too long. Need to feel you sooner. James. I know. It's complicated right now. Trust me. S. That was me. Sophia. Reduced to an initial, an obstacle in their path. My stomach clenched as I scrolled up, reading message after message. Their relationship wasn't just physical, it was emotional, deep, filled with inside jokes and shared memories. And L wasn't the only one. There was also D and M, different conversations but similar themes. James was leading multiple lives, and I was only part of one of them. I put his phone back exactly as I'd found it and retreated to the guest bathroom where I could cry silently. Part of me wanted to wake him, confront him, demand explanations. But another part, perhaps the wiser part, knew I needed more information before proceeding. The next morning, I called in sick to work. As soon as James left for the office, I began searching our house. In his desk drawer, beneath tax documents, I found a second phone. In the garage toolbox, a set of keys I didn't recognize. In his winter coat pocket, movie ticket stubs from dates we never went on. Each discovery was a body blow, but the worst was yet to come. That afternoon, I drove to his office, parking across the street. I watched as employees exited the building at day's end. James emerged at 5:30, but he didn't head toward the parking garage where his car was supposedly parked. Instead, he walked 3 blocks to a coffee shop where a woman waited at an outdoor table. She stood when she saw him, embracing him with familiar ease before they kissed. Not a friendly peck, a lover's kiss. I felt physically ill, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They sat together for almost an hour, his hand often reaching across to touch hers. Then they left together, walking toward a residential area nearby. I followed at a distance, watching them enter an apartment building. James used a key, those unknown keys from the toolbox, I realized. I waited outside that building for 2 hours before accepting he wouldn't be coming out anytime soon. The drive home was a blur of tears and growing rage. By the time I parked in our driveway, something had hardened inside me. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. James called around 8 p.m., claiming he was working late. I played along, telling him I'd already eaten dinner and was heading to bed early with a headache. He sounded relieved, promising not to wake me when he got home. He returned after midnight. I pretended to be asleep as he slipped into bed, smelling of unfamiliar perfume and lies. In the darkness, I made my plan. The next day was Friday. I told James I was visiting my sister in New Hampshire for the weekend, something I occasionally did. He seemed delighted at the prospect of having the house to himself, barely hiding his eagerness for me to leave. "Take your time," he said. "Maybe stay through Monday if you want." I drove away that afternoon, but only went as far as a hotel 10 minutes from our house. From there, I called my actual sister, Rachel, and my closest friend, Tara. They were shocked but supportive, coming to my hotel room bearing wine and determination to help. "We need evidence," Tara said, always practical. "If you're going to confront him, you need irrefutable proof." "What kind of evidence?" Rachel asked. "Everything," I replied. "His schedule, his movements, these other women, his real family, all of it." Over that weekend, my small support team helped me uncover James's elaborate web of deception. Tara's boyfriend worked in IT and recovered deleted texts from a backup of my laptop, where James had occasionally synced his phone. Rachel drove me around as we tracked James's movements, from our house to the apartment I'd seen him enter, then to a different woman's home across town, and finally to a Sunday family dinner at a large colonial house in Brookline. From a public records search, we discovered that contrary to his stories of humble beginnings, James came from considerable wealth. His father was a prominent surgeon, his mother a former state senator. The grandmother who supposedly raised him was very much alive, but she lived in Florida, not Vermont. His dead parents hosted regular society functions. His sister Rebecca, of the birthday card, was a lawyer with a practice in downtown Boston. The James Bennett I married had been carefully crafted fiction. The real James Prescott Bennett III had simply borrowed parts of his actual life, twisted others beyond recognition, and created a persona designed to appeal to me specifically. As Sunday evening approached, I had enough evidence to destroy the fantasy he'd built. But one question remained unanswered. Why me? What was I to him? A convenient cover story, a secondary amusement, or something else entirely? Monday morning, I waited until James left for work before returning home. The house felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like an elaborate movie set where I'd been unknowingly performing for years. I moved through the rooms methodically, gathering important documents, irreplaceable keepsakes, and enough clothing for a few weeks. Then I sat at our dining room table and waited. I had called James's office claiming a family emergency. His assistant promised he would come home immediately. When I heard his key in the lock 40 minutes later, my heart raced, but I remained outwardly calm. Sophia? What's wrong? Are you okay? Concern laced his voice as he rushed in, briefcase still in hand. He stopped short when he saw me sitting calmly at the table, a folder between my hands. Sit down, James. Or should I call you Jamie? That's what Lisa calls you, right? And Danielle prefers Jay? I wonder what Melissa calls you. The color drained from his face. For once, he seemed at a loss for words. 3 years, I continued, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. 3 years I believed everything you told me. The orphaned boy, the self-made man, the devoted husband, all lies. Sophia, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain these? I opened the folder, spreading photographs across the table. James entering Lisa's apartment, kissing Danielle, sitting at his parents' dinner table. Can you explain the second phone? The fake business trips? The family you said was dead? He sank into a chair, eyes darting between the evidence and my face. It's complicated, he finally said. Actually, it's quite simple. You're a liar. A pathological one, I'm guessing. What I can't figure out is why. Why me? Why marriage? You clearly don't believe in monogamy, so why the charade? James ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Now it seemed like another calculated move in his performance. You weren't supposed to find out, he said, as if that explained everything. That's your answer? I wasn't supposed to know I was living a lie. My calm was fracturing, anger seeping through. Do the others know about each other? About me? No. He looked down. No one knows everything. Except you. You know all the lies, all the stories you've told, all the lives you're manipulating. What kind of person does that, James? He looked up then, and what I saw in his eyes chilled me. Not remorse or shame, but annoyance, as if I'd spoiled an amusing game. The kind who gets bored easily, he said. The kind who needs more than one life, one identity, one relationship to feel fulfilled. And my role in this sick game was what exactly? You were perfect, Sophia. Trusting, independent enough not to be clingy, successful enough to be interesting, but not so ambitious that you'd disrupt the arrangement. You made the perfect wife on paper, the respectable facade. Each word was a slap. I had been selected, not for love, but for utility, a convenient character in his elaborate production. And Lisa, Danielle, Melissa? What are they? Different needs, different roles. He shrugged, dropping all pretense now that he'd been exposed. Lisa's exciting, unpredictable. Danielle understands my professional ambitions. Melissa's family connections are valuable. And your actual family? The ones who are very much alive despite what you told me? A complication. They have expectations I don't care to meet. It's easier to compartmentalize. I stood up, unable to bear his proximity any longer. You're sick, James. There's something fundamentally broken in you. Just because I don't subscribe to conventional relationships doesn't make me broken. His voice hardened. It makes me honest, at least with myself. Honest? I laughed bitterly. You wouldn't recognize honesty if it slapped you in the face, which is exactly what I'm about to do. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, papers I had picked up that morning. Divorce papers. I've already signed my part. He glanced at them dismissively. You're overreacting. We can work through this. There's no we anymore. There never really was. I pushed the papers toward him. Sign them, James. End this cleanly, or I promise I'll make sure everyone in your carefully constructed world learns the truth. Your family, your other women, your colleagues, everyone. You wouldn't. Try me. I held his gaze unflinching. I've already compiled evidence packages for each person you've deceived. One word from me, and your entire house of cards collapses. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. His reputation, his carefully segregated lives, all of it hinged on continued secrecy. You have until Friday, I said, gathering my purse. I'll be staying with Rachel. My lawyer will contact yours. As I moved toward the door, James called after me. Sophia, wait. What do you want? Money? The house? Name it. I turned back one last time. I want nothing from you except the truth. And since you're incapable of that, distance will have to do. Walking out that door was both the hardest and easiest thing I'd ever done. Hard because I was leaving behind years of what I thought was my life. Easy because I was finally stepping away from a beautifully crafted lie. I spent the next week in a daze, moving between Rachel's guest room and her living room couch, alternating between crying jags and periods of numb disbelief. My sister was my anchor, fielding calls from concerned friends and making sure I ate something each day. On Wednesday, James's lawyer contacted mine. He would sign the papers without contest if I agreed to complete confidentiality. He's terrified you'll expose him, my lawyer explained over the phone. He's offering a very generous settlement. I don't want his money, I insisted. Take it, Rachel countered after I hung up. Consider it payment for wasted years. Against my initial instinct, I followed her advice. The settlement would give me financial breathing room to rebuild my life. A life free from James's elaborate fabrications. By Friday afternoon, the preliminary agreement was signed. I would keep the house, receive a substantial cash settlement, and maintain my silence. In exchange, James would disappear from my life completely. That evening, as Rachel and I shared a bottle of wine, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. We need to talk. James using yet another secret phone. I showed Rachel, who immediately grabbed my device. Block him, she said firmly. Every new number, every attempt at contact. He's manipulative. Give him an inch and he'll take over your life again. She was right, of course. I blocked the number and every subsequent one he used to reach me over the next few days. The texts became increasingly desperate, then angry, then threatening. You'll regret this. Read the final message before the attempts at contact abruptly stopped. 2 weeks after discovering James's deceptions, I returned to work. My colleagues knew only that I was going through a sudden divorce, not the sordid details. I was grateful for their tact, for the way they respected my privacy while offering subtle support. Diane brought coffee to my desk each morning. My boss approved a flexible schedule. Little kindnesses that helped me navigate those difficult days. By month's end, I had moved back into the house. Our house, now mine alone. I rearranged furniture, painted walls, replaced bedding, anything to erase James's presence. Still, memories lingered in every corner. One evening, sorting through boxes in the attic, I found a journal I'd kept during our first year together. Reading those pages was like peering into another life, one where I had been completely, blissfully unaware of the deception surrounding me. My entries were full of hope, love, and gratitude for finding someone who seemed to understand me so completely. That's when it hit me. The true depth of James's manipulation. He hadn't just lied about his past or his fidelity. He had studied me, learning my hopes, fears, and desires, then shaped himself into exactly what I was looking for. The perfect mirror, reflecting back the partner I thought I wanted. I threw the journal across the room, watching it hit the wall and fall to the floor, pages splayed open. In that moment, I questioned everything. If James had so completely deceived me, how could I trust my own judgment again? How could I believe in my ability to recognize authenticity in others or in myself? The next day, I called a therapist whose name I'd had saved in my phone for weeks, but hadn't found the courage to contact. Dr. Lillian Parker specialized in trauma and recovery from relational abuse. Her first available appointment was 3 weeks away, but I took it, marking the date on my calendar with a sense of both dread and hope. In the meantime, I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and bringing manuscripts home to edit on weekends. Reading other people's stories became my escape from my own. I particularly gravitated toward strong female protagonists who overcame adversity, women who recreated themselves after loss. It was during this period that I received an unexpected invitation from an author whose book I had edited the previous year. Claire Montgomery was hosting a small writing retreat at her lake house in Maine, and she wanted me to join as editorial consultant. 6 authors, 3 days of workshops and writing time, far from Boston and its painful associations. "You need this," Diane insisted when I mentioned the invitation. "Fresh air, new people, different surroundings. Say yes." Despite my reservations about leaving my newfound sanctuary, I agreed. The week before the retreat, I packed a small suitcase with practical clothing, several books, and my laptop. The drive to Claire's lake house took just over 3 hours, winding through increasingly rural landscapes until I reached a secluded property surrounded by pine trees, with a stunning view of the water. Claire greeted me with a warm hug, as if we were old friends rather than professional acquaintances. "I'm so glad you came," she said, helping me with my bag. "Everyone's excited to meet you." The other guests included 2 published authors I recognized, a literary agent from New York, and 2 aspiring writers who had won places at the retreat through a contest. Everyone was polite, engaged, and refreshingly focused on writing rather than personal drama. That first evening, sitting on the deck watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Simple, uncomplicated peace. No one here knew about James or my failed marriage. No one was watching me with pitying eyes or waiting for me to fall apart. I could just be Sophia, editor and book lover. "You look like you needed this," Claire said, joining me with 2 glasses of wine, offering one to me. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, accepting the glass. "Let's just say I recognize the look of someone who's recently escaped something difficult." She settled into the chair beside mine. "I won't pry, but if you ever want to talk—" "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Maybe someday. For now, I'm just grateful to be here." "To new beginnings, then," she said, raising her glass. I echoed the toast, feeling the weight on my shoulders lighten just a fraction. To new beginnings. The writing retreat became my unexpected turning point. For 3 days, I immersed myself in stories, discussions about character development, plot structures, and the transformative power of narrative. In the evenings, our small group gathered around a fire pit by the lake, sharing personal anecdotes and professional advice. On the final night, after the others had retired to their rooms, Claire and I remained by the dying embers. The night was clear, stars reflecting on the still water, creating the illusion of infinite space above and below. "You know," Claire said thoughtfully, "the best stories come from our deepest wounds." I turned to look at her, this woman I'd known professionally but was just beginning to understand personally. "Is that how you wrote After the Storm?" I asked, referring to her award-winning novel about a woman rebuilding her life after losing everything in a hurricane. Yes and no. She poked at the embers with a stick. The hurricane was metaphorical. The loss was real. Something in her tone invited confidence. Perhaps it was the starlight, the distance from Boston, or simply the need to unburden myself to someone who wasn't entangled in my daily life. Whatever the reason, I found myself speaking. My husband was living multiple lives, I said, the words emerging more easily than I had expected. Different women, different identities, different stories, all carefully managed so none of us would discover the others. Claire remained silent, allowing me space to continue. The thing that haunts me isn't just the betrayal, it's that I never suspected. Not once. What does that say about me? About my ability to recognize truth? It says nothing about you, Claire replied firmly. And everything about him. Skilled manipulators can deceive anyone, especially those with open hearts. But how do I trust again? How do I know what's real? She considered this before answering. You don't, immediately. Trust builds slowly after betrayal. But here's what helped me. Instead of trying to protect yourself from deception, focus on building a life so authentic and fulfilled that even if deception comes, it can't destroy you. Her words settled into me, simple yet profound. I had been asking the wrong question. Not, how do I avoid being hurt again? But, how do I become unbreakable regardless? We talked until the fire died completely, until the night air chilled our skin and the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. By the time we finally went inside, I felt something new taking root within me. Not healing exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it. I returned to Boston with Claire's words echoing in my mind. Building an authentic life became my focus. I started with small steps. I enrolled in a creative writing class at the local community college. I joined a hiking group that met on Saturday mornings. I volunteered at a literacy program for immigrant children. Each new activity connected me with different people, expanding my world beyond the narrow confines it had shrunk to during my marriage. At Dr. Parker's suggestion, I also began journaling again, not about James or the past, but about each day's small victories and challenges. The practice helped me recognize patterns in my thinking, particularly my tendency to blame myself for not detecting James's deceptions earlier. Forgive yourself, Dr. Parker urged during one session. You weren't stupid or blind. You were trusting, and that's not a character flaw. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected email from a woman named Danielle Matthews. The name was instantly familiar, one of James's other women. My heart raced as I opened the message. I know who you are, she wrote. James told me everything after you left him. I think we should meet. There's more you should know. My instinct was to delete the email immediately. What good could come from meeting one of James's other victims, or accomplices? I couldn't be sure which category Danielle fell into. I forwarded the message to Rachel, asking for her opinion. Trap, she replied immediately. He's using her to get to you. Don't respond. Her assessment made sense, yet something about the email's tone nagged at me. I reread it several times, noting the careful wording, the lack of emotional manipulation or urgency that would have been James's style. Against Rachel's advice, I wrote back, "What more could I possibly need to know?" Danielle's response came within minutes. "He's still watching you, and I'm not the only one who wants to talk. Please, public place, your choice." Those words sent a chill through me. Still watching? I hadn't seen or heard from James in months. I'd assumed our agreement had satisfied him, that he'd moved on to new deceptions, new victims. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet Danielle at a busy cafe near my office, during lunch hour when the place would be crowded. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of both entrances, my phone ready to dial Rachel if anything seemed off. When Danielle walked in, I recognized her immediately from the photos I'd taken during my investigation. Tall, confident, with striking red hair. She spotted me and approached, her expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from mine. "You said he's watching me," I replied, skipping pleasantries. "Explain." She glanced around before leaning forward. "After you left, James was unhinged. He talked about you constantly, obsessing over how you'd discovered everything, how you'd threatened his carefully constructed world. That was months ago." "Yes, but it didn't stop. He has someone drive by your house, your office. He checks your social media through fake accounts. He knows about your writing class, your hiking group." My stomach clenched. "How do you know this?" "Because until last month, I was still with him." She looked down. "I thought I was special, that we had something real despite his marriage. When you left, he told me a story about you being unstable, threatening him. I believed him. God help me. What changed? I found out about Lisa, about Melissa, about 2 other women you probably don't even know exist. History repeating itself." She pulled out her phone, showing me photos. James with different women in different settings, all recent. "He can't stop. It's compulsive. And you're telling me this because he's dangerous, Sophia. Not physically violent, maybe, but psychologically. When I confronted him, he threatened to destroy my career, my reputation. Said he had compromising photos, recordings." She took a shaky breath. "I believe him, and I'm worried about what he might do to you." "I have legal protection," I said, though uncertainty crept into my voice. Legal protection means nothing to someone who doesn't recognize boundaries. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. "There are 5 of us now who know about each other. We've been comparing notes. The patterns are identical. He isolates, manipulates, controls. When that fails, he retaliates. What are you suggesting? We're stronger together. United front. If he can't divide us, he loses power." She pushed a business card toward me. "My real number. Think about it. The others want to meet too." As Danielle left the cafe, I remained seated, turning her card over in my fingers, weighing possibilities against risks. If what she said was true, James wasn't just a liar. He was something far more dangerous. And if he was indeed watching me, the fragile new life I was building might be more vulnerable than I realized. I didn't call Danielle right away. Instead, I spent the next week in a heightened state of awareness, noticing details I might have previously overlooked. The same blue sedan parked on different streets near my house. A man I didn't recognize sitting in my regular coffee shop, never ordering anything, always leaving shortly after I did. A sense of being observed when I attended my writing class. Could these be coincidences? My paranoia manufacturing patterns where none existed? Possibly. But the alternative, that James was indeed monitoring my movements, was too disturbing to dismiss without investigation. I consulted with my lawyer, who recommended hiring a private investigator to confirm whether I was being followed. The PI, a former police detective named Margaret, suggested we conduct a simple test. "Go about your normal routine for 3 days," she instructed. "I'll monitor from a distance, see if the same individuals appear repeatedly. If someone's watching you, they'll establish patterns we can identify." The waiting was excruciating. Each time I left my house, I fought the urge to scan surroundings for watchers, knowing such obvious behavior would compromise Margaret's observation. I forced myself to act naturally, all while feeling as though invisible eyes tracked my every move. On the 4th day, Margaret called with her findings. "You've got a shadow," she confirmed. "Male, mid-30s, professional grade, not law enforcement, too sloppy, private sector. He's been consistent all 3 days, different vehicles but same person." My heart sank. "Can you find out who hired him?" "Working on it. In the meantime, I'd suggest varying your routines, being unpredictable, and maybe it's time to consider a security system for your home." That evening, I finally called Danielle. "I believe you," I said when she answered. "I want to meet the others." We arranged to gather that weekend at a restaurant in Cambridge. Neutral territory for all involved. I arrived first, selecting a corner booth with good sightlines to the entrance. Danielle came next, followed by a blonde woman she introduced as Melissa. Within 15 minutes, 2 more women joined us. Lisa, whom I'd seen James with months earlier, and Emma, the newest addition to his collection of deceptions. The 5 of us sat in awkward silence initially, studying each other. Women who would never have chosen to meet under different circumstances, united only by our connection to a pathological liar. "So," Lisa finally said, breaking the tension, "we all fell for the same garbage lines." That simple acknowledgement, tinged with self-deprecating humor, released something in the group. Suddenly, we were talking over each other, comparing stories, identifying identical patterns in James's approach. The charming introduction, the carefully crafted backstory tailored to appeal to each woman's sympathies or interests, the gradual isolation from friends who might ask too many questions, the elaborate excuses for his absences. "He told me he traveled frequently for work," Emma said. "Environmental consulting. Investment banking for me," Melissa added. "Marketing director?" I said. Lisa shook her head in disbelief. "Pediatric surgeon with flexible hours. That's what I got." "The man's a chameleon," Danielle observed, becoming whatever each of us needed. As the evening progressed, our conversation shifted from comparing notes on James's deceptions to discussing his more concerning recent behaviors. Melissa reported strange calls from blocked numbers. Lisa had found evidence that her email had been accessed without her knowledge. Emma was convinced someone had been inside her apartment while she was at work. "It's escalating," Danielle warned. "That's why I reached out. I'm worried about what happens next." "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. "A restraining order? We already tried that individually." "Something more permanent," Melissa said. "We need to stop him completely." "How?" Emma looked skeptical. "He's too careful to leave evidence of actual crimes." Lisa, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke. "We expose him, publicly, all of us together, with evidence. His family, his workplace, social media if necessary. He'll retaliate," I warned. "Not if we strike first with everything we have," Danielle argued. "United front, remember? He can't come after all of us." We debated strategies late into the night, weighing risks against potential outcomes. By the time we parted, we had formed an unlikely alliance, 5 women determined to reclaim their narratives from the man who had stolen their trust. Our plan unfolded over the next 2 weeks. Each woman gathered evidence, photographs, text messages, gifts with attached stories. I compiled everything into a comprehensive timeline, showing the full extent of James's deceptions. Melissa, who worked in public relations, crafted a statement we could all stand behind. Lisa, who had maintained contact with James's sister Rebecca, arranged a meeting with his family. The day before our planned confrontation, Margaret the PI called with new information. "Your shadow works for a security firm owned by BPS Holdings," she reported. "Guess who owns BPS?" "James?" I guessed. "No, but close. Bennett Prescott Sr., your ex-husband's father." This revelation changed everything. James wasn't acting alone. His family was involved. The stakes had just gotten higher. I immediately called an emergency meeting with the other women. We gathered at my house, checking carefully for surveillance before entering. "We need to rethink our approach," I explained, sharing Margaret's discovery. "This isn't just about James anymore. His family is enabling him. Or controlling him," Melissa suggested. "What if James is just the front man for something bigger?" The question hung in the air, shifting our perspective once again. What if James's deceptions served some larger purpose beyond his personal gratification? What if we were all unwitting players in a game whose rules and objectives remained hidden? Emma, who had been the quietest member of our group, suddenly spoke up. "We've been focusing on what James did to us. Maybe we should be asking why. What was he getting from each relationship beyond the obvious?" We turned to her, intrigued. "Think about it," she continued. "Melissa works in PR for political campaigns. Lisa's brother is a federal prosecutor. Danielle's firm handles cybersecurity for major corporations. Sophia edits books that often contain sensitive information before publication. and I develop algorithms for financial trading systems. A chill ran through the room as Emma's implication became clear. You think he targeted us for access to information? Danielle asked. Or influence, Emma replied. Or both. I thought back to the countless times James had asked about manuscripts I was editing, his interest in political memoirs or financial exposés. I'd always believed it was genuine curiosity about my work. Now I wondered what information I might have inadvertently revealed. If that's true, Lisa said slowly, then this is much bigger than relationship fraud. This could be corporate espionage, market manipulation, who knows what else. We need proof, Melissa insisted. Concrete evidence linking James to information theft or misuse. My laptop, I realized suddenly. James insisted on upgrading it last year. Said he was installing better security software. What if he actually installed spyware? The others exchanged alarmed glances, each mentally reviewing similar instances where James had access to their devices or sensitive information. We need technical help, Danielle said. Professional grade. Someone who can detect sophisticated surveillance without tipping off whoever might be monitoring. Lisa pulled out her phone. My brother knows people, legitimate cybersecurity experts who work with federal investigations. Let me make a call. Within 24 hours, we had assembled a new team, our 5-woman coalition plus 3 experts in digital forensics, corporate security, and legal strategy. The investigation expanded beyond James himself to include his family's business interests, political connections, and financial holdings. What emerged was far more disturbing than romantic deception. James had been systematically collecting information from each woman, information that could be leveraged for financial gain, political advantage, or corporate sabotage. The Prescott family business, ostensibly a legitimate investment firm, had suspicious patterns of successful trades corresponding with information James could have obtained through his relationships. This isn't just about exposing a cheater anymore, Lisa's brother explained during a secure meeting at his office. This is potentially criminal activity, wire fraud, securities violations, possible blackmail. What do we do? I asked, overwhelmed by the escalating stakes. Document everything. Build the case methodically. Then we take it to people who can act on it legally. He looked around at our group. Are you all prepared for what comes next? This won't be quick or easy. The Prescotts have resources, connections. We exchanged glances. 5 women who had started as victims but were transforming into something else. Witnesses, whistleblowers, advocates for justice. We're in, Danielle spoke for all of us. Whatever it takes. That night, alone in my house with new security measures in place, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed in just a few months. From believing I was in a loving marriage to discovering layers of deception to now finding myself at the center of what might become a major criminal investigation. I thought about Claire's words at the lake house. Focus on building a life so authentic and fulfilled that even if deception comes, it can't destroy you. The path ahead would be difficult, potentially dangerous, but for the first time since discovering James's lies, I felt something unexpected. Purpose. Spring arrived in Boston with surprising warmth, cherry blossoms lining Commonwealth Avenue weeks earlier than usual. The seasonal renewal mirrored the transformation happening in my own life. Over the previous 2 months, our coalition had worked tirelessly, building a case against James and the Prescott family. The evidence we'd gathered was substantial. Emma had recovered deleted files showing James had used spyware to monitor her work developing trading algorithms. Melissa discovered communications proving he had leaked confidential campaign strategies to opposing political interests. Danielle found evidence that sensitive cybersecurity protocols from her firm had been compromised shortly after James had access to her work laptop. My contribution was perhaps the most damning. A series of manuscripts I'd edited contained financial information that had been exploited for market advantage before publication. When we overlaid trading activity from Prescott Investment Group with the timeline of my work on these manuscripts, the correlation was undeniable. Lisa's brother had connected us with federal investigators who specialized in white-collar crime. Initially skeptical, They became increasingly interested as our evidence mounted. Now, we were approaching the culmination of months of careful work, formal statements, and testimony that would launch an official investigation. The morning before my scheduled interview with investigators, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang just after 8 a.m. Through the security camera I'd installed, I saw Rebecca Bennett, James's sister, standing on my porch, alone and visibly anxious. I texted Lisa immediately. "Rebecca is at my door. Advice?" Her response came quickly. "Camera on. Record everything. Don't let her in. Hear her out but share nothing." Taking a deep breath, I opened the door but remained in the threshold, blocking entry. "Rebecca, this is unexpected." She looked different from the confident lawyer I'd seen in photographs. Tired, strained, with dark circles under her eyes. "Sophia, I know we've never formally met, but I need to speak with you. It's important." "About your brother? Or your family's business practices?" Her surprise at my directness was evident. "You know more than I expected. I've had months to learn. Why are you here?" She glanced around nervously. "Not outside, please." Against my better judgment, I allowed her into the foyer, but no further. The security camera would record our conversation from this angle. "Make it quick," I said. "I have somewhere to be." "James is missing," she said without preamble. 3 days now. No contact, accounts emptied. Our parents are claiming ignorance, but they're lying. Something's happening within the family, something they won't tell me about. Why come to me? We're divorced. Because I've seen the federal requests for documents. I know an investigation is brewing, and I think James is either running or being hidden by our parents. She lowered her voice. "I think they're cleaning house, Sophia. Removing liabilities." James being the liability? James. Records. Possibly people. Her eyes met mine directly. I'm afraid for him, and maybe for myself. I studied her, looking for signs of manipulation or deception. Why should I believe you? Your family has a documented history of elaborate lies. Because I've brought proof. She reached into her bag slowly, pulling out a flash drive. Financial transfers, unusual communications, security contracts. Things I've been gathering for months as I became increasingly concerned about my family's activities. She placed it on the small table between us. "I'm a lawyer, Sophia. I've spent my career upholding the law, not subverting it. When I realized what was happening, I had to act. I made no move to take the drive. Why not go directly to authorities?" "Family loyalty is complicated," she admitted. "I needed time to be certain, to gather enough evidence. And..." She hesitated. "I was afraid. The Prescotts aren't just my family. They're powerful, connected. So why now? Because James disappearing crossed a line. Whatever else he's done, and I know it's substantial, he's still my brother." Her composure cracked slightly. "Help me find him before something worse happens. Use this information in your case against my family if you must, but help me ensure James's safety." I remained silent, weighing options. Rebecca could be telling the truth, or executing another layer of Prescott family manipulation. "I'll have this analyzed," I finally said, picking up the drive without promising anything. "If it contains what you claim, I'll pass it to the appropriate authorities." "There's something else you should know," Rebecca said as I moved to show her out. "James didn't conceive this scheme alone. My father has been running similar operations for decades, cultivating relationships for information, using people as unwitting assets. James was just following the family playbook. That doesn't excuse what he did." "No," she agreed sadly. "But it might explain it. Nature versus nurture. James was groomed for this role from childhood." After Rebecca left, I immediately contacted our coalition and Lisa's brother. Within hours, cybersecurity experts were analyzing the flash drive in a secure environment, confirming its contents weren't malicious. The data was legitimate and explosive. Internal communications showing the Prescott family had indeed been engaged in information theft and market manipulation for generations. James was merely the latest operative in a long-standing family enterprise. More concerning were recent messages suggesting a containment protocol had been activated, with references to asset relocation and evidence mitigation. Our scheduled meetings with federal investigators took on new urgency. What had begun as an investigation into one man's deceptions had evolved into the potential dismantling of a criminal enterprise that spanned decades. As I prepared to give my formal statement, I thought about James, the man I had loved and the stranger he had always been. Was he a victim of his family's influence, as Rebecca suggested? A willing participant? Both? The truth was likely somewhere in that gray area, complex and unsatisfying. That evening, our coalition gathered one last time before the official process began. 5 women who had started as strangers connected by betrayal, now united in purpose. "Whatever happens next," Lisa said, raising a glass in our impromptu toast. "We did this together. We reclaimed our stories. And potentially stopped others from being victimized," Melissa added. "To the truth," Danielle said, "however complicated it may be." "To the truth?" we echoed. As we parted that night, I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. The path to healing wasn't linear. There would still be difficult days, painful memories, moments of doubt, but I was no longer defined solely by what had happened to me. I had taken active steps toward justice, toward reclaiming control of my narrative. I returned home to find an envelope that had been slipped under my door. No postmark, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Harbor Point Marina. Slip 42, midnight. Come alone if you want answers." I stood frozen, the note trembling in my hand. Was it a trap? A genuine lead? After everything that had happened, walking into an isolated meeting seemed foolish beyond measure. Yet the possibility of final answers, of true closure, was powerfully tempting. I called Rachel, then Lisa's brother, then Margaret the PI. The consensus was clear: too risky, too suspicious, too likely to be a setup. Local authorities could check the marina instead. I agreed with their assessment intellectually, but emotionally, something pulled at me. Not love or loyalty to James, but a need for completion, for looking into the eyes of the person who had so thoroughly disrupted my life, and showing them I had survived, evolved, grown stronger. As midnight approached, I made my decision. I didn't go to the marina alone. Margaret the PI positioned herself as backup, with Lisa's brother coordinating with harbor police who remained on standby. I wore a concealed recording device and carried a GPS tracker with panic button. Every precaution had been taken, yet my heart still raced as I walked down the darkened dock, the gentle lapping of water against boats providing an incongruously peaceful soundtrack to this tense moment. Slip 42 held a modest cabin cruiser named Family Legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. No lights were visible, but the boat rocked slightly, indicating someone was aboard. I paused at the edge of the dock, scanning for movement. "I'm here," I called out, loudly enough to be heard but not to attract attention from neighboring vessels. A shadow shifted near the cabin entrance. Then James emerged, looking so different from the man I'd married that I almost didn't recognize him. Thinner, unshaven, with none of his usual polish or confidence. His expensive clothes had been replaced by faded jeans and a worn sweatshirt. "You came." His voice sounded hollow, stripped of its usual charm. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. "Why am I here, James?" "Because I owe you this much." The truth, finally. He gestured toward the boat. "Will you come aboard? Just to talk." I shook my head. "I'm fine right here." He nodded, accepting my boundaries perhaps for the first time. Fair enough. He lowered himself to sit on the edge of the boat, feet dangling over the side, maintaining distance between us. "By now you know about my family, what we do, what we've always done. Using relationships to gather information, manipulating people's trust for profit. That's the simplest version, yes." He rubbed his face wearily. The full version is more complicated. The Prescott legacy, generations of strategic relationships, my father's expectations, my training since childhood. "You're not claiming you had no choice." "No, I had choices. I made the wrong ones. He looked up at me, his expression surprisingly vulnerable. The thing is, Sophia, it started as the family business. But with you, it became something else. Don't, I warned. Don't try to tell me what we had was real. Not at first, he admitted. You were a target because of your publishing connections. The manuscripts you worked on contained valuable information. But then what? Then I started wishing it was real. He gave a bitter laugh. Ironic, right? The professional liar wanting something authentic. The longer we were together, the more difficult it became to separate the performance from genuine feelings. If that were true, you would have stopped the other relationships, the spying, the information theft. I know. That's why I'm not asking forgiveness, just trying to explain. He looked out over the dark water. The family business consumed me, became my identity. By the time I recognized what was happening, who I was becoming, I was already trapped in the web I'd helped create. You're still responsible for your actions. Completely, he agreed. That's why I'm here. To take responsibility in the only way I can now. From inside his sweatshirt, he withdrew a small external hard drive. Everything. Financial records going back 20 years, client lists, operational details, the complete Prescott playbook. He held it out toward me. I'm testifying tomorrow. This corroborates what I'll say. What Rebecca has already provided. I made no move to take it. Why the dramatic midnight meeting? Why not go directly to authorities? Because I needed to see you one last time. To say this to your face. His voice strengthened. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved truth, loyalty, authentic love, not the counterfeit version I offered. I'm sorry, Sophia. Not just for the deception, but for making you question your judgment, your worth, your ability to recognize genuine connection. The apology hit me harder than I expected, not because I still loved him, or even because I fully believed him, but because it acknowledged the deeper damage his deception had caused, the way it had made me doubt myself. Your family knows you're doing this? They suspect. That's why I disappeared, before they could implement their containment protocol. In their world, family members who become liabilities don't tend to fare well. He placed the hard drive on the dock between us. I'm entering witness protection after my testimony. This life, James Bennett or Prescott or whatever name I've used, is over. I looked at him, really looked at the man I had once built my life around. Despite everything, I felt an unexpected flicker of pity. James had constructed so many false identities that he'd lost himself in the process. His prison had been partially of his own making, but it was a prison nonetheless. I hope you find peace, James, I said finally. And I hope you eventually find your authentic self, whatever that might be. I doubt peace is in my future, he replied with resignation. But maybe redemption is still possible. He stood, preparing to retreat into the boat's cabin. The authorities know where to find me until tomorrow. After that, I'll be gone. You won't see me again. As he turned away, I called after him. Was any of it real? Any moment at all? He paused, looking back at me one last time. The morning at Cape Cod, watching the sunrise from the beach. The night we got caught in the rainstorm walking home from dinner. The Christmas we volunteered at the shelter instead of going to Vermont. His voice softened. Those moments were real, Sophia. Not enough to justify anything else, but real nonetheless. With that, he disappeared into the cabin. I picked up the hard drive and walked back along the dock, feeling strangely lightened. Not because I believed or forgave James completely, but because I no longer needed his validation or explanation to move forward. The subsequent weeks unfolded in a blur of legal proceedings, testimony, and media attention as the Prescott family enterprise unraveled publicly. James and Rebecca's evidence, combined with what our coalition had gathered, resulted in multiple federal indictments. The Prescott parents were arrested. Financial penalties were levied. Restitution processes began. James himself disappeared into the witness protection program after his testimony. I heard through Lisa's brother that he'd been instrumental in helping authorities understand the full scope of his family's operations. Small redemption, perhaps, but redemption nonetheless. As for me, I declined most interview requests, preferring to process my experiences privately rather than become a public figure defined by victimhood. Instead, I channeled my energy into establishing a nonprofit organization with Danielle, Lisa, Melissa, and Emma, a support network for people recovering from relationship fraud and identity deception. 1 year after discovering James's initial lies, I returned to Claire's lake house in Maine, this time as a participant in a writing workshop rather than an editor. Under her gentle guidance, I began transforming my experiences into a memoir, not a tale of victimization, but a story of resilience, of women finding strength in coalition, of truth eventually emerging from even the most carefully constructed lies. Writing is how we reclaim our narratives, Claire reminded the group during our first session. How we transform what happened to us into what we learned, what we built, what we overcame. On my last evening there, sitting on the same deck where Claire and I had talked the previous year, I opened my laptop and typed the words that had been forming in my mind for months. I thought I knew what truth looked like, until deception wore its face. This is not a story about being deceived. It's about what happens afterward, when you discover that authenticity isn't found in others' actions, but in your own response to them. It's about rebuilding trust, not just in others, but in yourself. The words flowed easily, honestly, my own voice finally drowning out the echoes of James's lies. As the sun set over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and pink, I felt the final pieces settling into place. Not perfect healing, but wholeness despite the scars. The woman who had once believed in a false version of love had transformed into someone stronger, wiser, more authentically herself. The threads of deception that had bound me had become threads of connection with others who understood, who had walked similar paths. And those connections, unlike the ones built on lies, formed a tapestry strong enough to sustain me through whatever came next. I saved my work, closed my laptop, and watched as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Whatever James was now, wherever he had gone, he no longer defined my story. That power belonged to me alone,